I'm Danica Lorer, and this is Lit Happens, your celebration of the literary arts here in Saskatchewan. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Ernie Louttit. Now, Ernie spent his career as a City of Saskatoon police officer. He was the third Indigenous officer in the city and served as a patrol officer on the west side. He retired as a sergeant after 26 years. Welcome, Ernie.
Thank you.
Now, since retiring, you've been busy. You've published a couple of books. So tell me, what gave you the idea that you wanted to write books?
Well, when I used to teach the other constables by telling stories, and I'd end up with maybe two guys in the hallway, and I'd be telling them this happened to me, and I'd go through this whole long story. By the time I was done, I'd have 10 or 11 people there, and then almost always at the end of it, someone would say, "Hey, Sarge, you should write a book." And I just started thinking about it, and my daughters, God bless them, but they skipped a lot of school when they were in high school, so I had all these empty notebooks, and I just started handwriting stories up. And I wrote about 100 pages of handwritten stories, and then I actually started to show them to people, my children, and they encouraged me to keep going. So then I knew just from experience that if I didn't start telling people that I actually was going to write a book, I would never have ever finished a book. So I just started telling them, I'm writing a book, because he didn't want to be that guy 7 years down the road saying, you know, how's the book coming? But,
okay.
So I got it done. I went really rapidly, and basically, you know, I think I knew always that I wanted to write. I wrote a little bit when I was younger. I wrote a short story back in '91. Drew Hayden Taylor actually was the guy that asked me to do it, and it was an anthology of Native writers from the University of Saskatchewan called Voices. But then we started to have kids, and life just kind of had a way of taking over, and I got so caught up in the job that I just sat on the back burner for a good 20 years before I actually committed myself to writing some stories.
And now these stories, you have Indian Ernie and more Indian Ernie, and they are the stories that you collected on the streets of Saskatoon here, mm-hmm. and through the eyes of an Indigenous officer, through the eyes of somebody who was actually part of the Saskatoon community. So what did that mean to you to be part of a community that you were seeing these stories?
Well, writing police stories, because there's, you know, because you have to keep the personal things
mm-hmm.
out there, you know. But a lot of people that have read both books saying, "Yeah, I remember that incident, or I remember this,"
mm-hmm.
and it was when I wrote it was just from my perspective, right? I'm like, it wasn't saying that this is the way it should be, or this is the way, you know, we should operate, or anything like that. Like my own perspectives on incidents I was involved in, and it just seemed to resonate with people, and. You know, and even the name of the book, which was kind of a little bit controversial, I thought, because when I was finished the first one, I was going to call it Not Even, which is a First Nations, like, you know,
mm-hmm.
Expression of disbelief, right? One I grew up with. But everybody said, you know, you should call the book Indian Ernie, because that's how that's how everybody got to know me, and it started, God bless them, with the little kids, because I had a habit of parking my car and walking around when I didn't have calls, but it was all mostly in Riversdale. So I'd walk around, and people would be looking, and you know, people with warrants would run, and the people that didn't have warrants were wanting to see who had warrants. But kids, you know, with no filter, would run up and they'd say, "Hey, what's your name?" And I'd say, "It's Ernie." And then they look at me, "Are you an Indian?" And I say, "Yeah." And then the next time I was in the block, I'd say, "Hey, Indian Ernie's here." And then after a while, that just everybody started calling me that. So it just became part of I guess, my identifiability as a police officer in Saskatoon, and so when I was done the books, my wife and my friends all just said, you know, just call it Indian Ernie. Everybody calls it Indian Ernie, and so I did. So it's kind of, you know, I don't want to say I speak for a lot of people, but the books kind of reflect a lot of people's experiences, and from my own perspective, but they bring their own perspectives in, and since I'm coming on 4 years out of policing. Just finished my third full year, and you know, people I meet, even like as recently as my last library talk, were familiar with the stories on a personal level, either their cousins or somebody that was was there or knew it or seen it from a different perspective, and it's really neat to hear other people's perspectives.
Well, and there's a beauty in our telling a story, because we can see these stories as news articles. Maybe we'd find a few lines in the Star Phoenix about something that happened, but we're not learning about the relationships of people and what we can do better if we don't tell our story. So I think is that part of the reason why you wanted to tell these stories, so that we continue to learn how to treat people.
Yeah, and you know, I wanted people, including police officers, to look at each other differently, right? And that was one of the unintended consequences, was because I've got a lot of positive feedback on both books. But I was in the gym, and this one lady came up to me and she goes, you know, her daughter was a police officer. She said, I never worried about my daughter till I read your books. I said, well, I definitely didn't intend it. I said, because I worked in a rough part of town, and you know, I was drawn to it. I was kind of an adrenaline junkie, and it's not always like that for everybody that's out there. But I just wanted people to get that kind of sense that, yeah, the guy that's writing you the ticket, you might say, what a stupid cop, but you don't know where he just came from. You don't know what he's been through, and it's the same for the officer walking up to the person to give them the ticket. They don't know where they came from. They might have just had the biggest, most horrendous argument with one of their family members, and you know, that took them 20 kilometers above the speed limit. And now to add to the stress, you know, you get stopped and you're getting a ticket. I just wanted people to pause and think about, you know, everybody's got a story. And it took me a while, you know, even as a young police officer, to learn that everybody had a story. Right, because I came out of the Army and everything's black and white, right? You know, bad guy, good guy, you know, citizen, victim, witness, right? You know, and it was all so black and white for so long. With it, you know, as you get older and you more experience and stuff, you started to see that everybody had a story. You know, like mental health. When I first started with Saskatoon Police, our mental health was we'd get a warrant from the court. We'd chase them and handcuff them, we'd bring them to the hospital, and that's the hospital's problem now, without a lot of insight. And I wrote about it in the second book, and you know, how I gained the insight, and how it was so much easier to do your job once you knew people's backstories, right? And a good example, there's a guy downtown still that yells at everybody that drives by him that he's going to kill them. Well, I've known that guy for years, and I know if a fly got ran over by a car, he would cry. But he's got that gruff, you know, so one of the things I tell young police officers is get to know people's backstories. It'll make your job so much easier. And on the same token, there are some truly evil people out there. Know their backstories too, because those are the people that'll hurt you if they get the chance, right? So it's, I guess, all perspective and getting people just to think, right? Think differently.
And that's the power of story. There's the power in telling the story, but there's even greater power with story and listening. And I think that's something that we all have to learn if we're going to live together and have a society that people treat each other like they should.
An elder told me that years ago, and you know what? It took 40 years before it sunk in. You know, he told me I talk too much. And I never realized the significance of what he told me. You know, until way later that, yeah, sometimes I had to listen more. You know, listen more, talk less, right? And there's a time to talk, there's a time to listen. So I think, you know, if anything, if I get people to think like that, to say, yeah, I need to know this person's story, and then I'll make my own, then I'll talk. Then I'll make my judgments, and then I'll decide how I'm going to interact with this person, right? Whether I should be afraid of him, or whether he's just dealing with some issue that he just can't get past, whatever the case is, right? And
so, are you still writing police stories, or are you working on something else?
You know, the next one will probably it's how to put it. It's a good combination of personal stories. Like if I could do the analogy, I was a player, then I was a coach, right? And now I've turned into a commentator. So the third book, I think, I have more commentary and maybe almost a little editorial in some of the stories, because I've tackled a lot of things like violence, media coverage, and actually I'm pretty excited. I'm waiting. It's going forward now, so without giving too much away, I'm pretty excited about the new one because it took me 2 years before I could even say I was a writer. You know, but this past year, I'm a little more comfortable with myself and the message I get. Don't always get it right, you know, and there's always somebody who's going to disagree. That's the beauty of living in a country like Canada. You know, we have the freedom to disagree, and if you don't want to listen to me, you don't like me, that's fine too, right? So I'm a little more comfortable now, and I think this third one is that's really gonna come across. Like the first one was my angry book, the second one was let me explain to you, and the third one is yeah, I want to just talk about this stuff. I hope you like it.
Well, Ernie, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Well, thank you.
I can't wait to read more. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our guest today was Ernie Louttit. I'm Danica Lorer, and this is Lit Happens. You can find past episodes by going to YouTube and searching for Shaw TV Saskatoon. You can find me on Facebook or Twitter, or you can contact me at danicalore@gmail.com. Thank you.